Hi, I'm Julian Kirkness. As you can probably tell, I'm from the other side of the pond. I have the distinction, I suppose, of being the first person I understand to sell an Access web app through the, and one of the few still, in fact. I just wanted to talk about, the pros and cons of that, how it's gone, how to do it, perhaps just discuss any other ideas that might be relevant to marketing web app. So we actually have technically 5, but really 3 apps. We have an HR app, which is my background. I've been a long time in the HR software business. We have a CRM app and we have a time recording app. They're all Access web apps. They all look pretty. You don't have to have this color scheme if you. They all look pretty similar. So when it comes to actually selling apps in the store, though, there are a few things that you need to understand to make the most of the opportunity, and I want to try and share some of that with you. So in terms of the experience that I've had so far, most of it's been pretty positive, and I'd say possibly the best part about the whole process are the publishing features built into Access web apps, which I'll be showing in a demo in a little while. So you may have seen the option to save for deployment, which saves an app package, as it's called, which is the file necessary to load into a SharePoint team site. It's a brilliant process. It saves a great deal of time. For example, I've probably published since the HR app was launched something like 30 updates to it over about a year and a half's time frame. It takes me now something like half an hour from going from a tested app to having the update actually on the App Store with any changes to the text on the store and so on done. And it makes lifecycle management for deployed apps an absolute breeze. The basic idea being that you produce a new version of your customers are notified that there's been an upgrade from the App Store. They apply the app, and the changes apply themselves. You don't really have to do very much to make the changes happen. Although you do have the option, and I will be showing you briefly how to do this, to set up what are called on-deploy macros, which are special macros which run when you install an update or install your initial. There are some problems with deploying Access web apps through the App Store, though. One of them is that Save for Deployment creates a locked app, which has some inflexibilities. The main issue here being that you can't get at the back-end database. So that makes data import quite difficult. It makes integration with other things like Power BI, just as an example, impossible. It means that there's very little you can do in terms of BI and so forth, apart from apps for Office graphs, which can be embedded in a web app, and creating data sheets with a download to Excel option, both of which I've used in my apps. I'm not a great fan of the apps for Office graphs because they tend to load very, very slowly, but I have got lots of options for clients to download data to produce their own charts and so on with it. On the other hand, the other option to produce an unlocked app has a couple of problems as well. The main one being that once a client has installed it, if you actually put a new version on the App Store and they apply it, it would most likely overwrite their data. And so they can be a little bit dangerous to ship in that form. I have a couple of unlocked apps on the App Store, but they're never changed. They're there as templates for people, really. Having said that, if you're deploying internally, then that's a perfectly reasonable option. But again, you can't easily onto the life cycle in the App Store. Actually, adding apps to the App Store is quite straightforward. But the first thing you have to do, and this is probably the hardest part, is to actually set up your Celery account with Microsoft. Obviously, if you've already got one, that's great, but you have to be approved. Your bank details have to be approved. Your tax details have to be approved. I think all the listeners here today are in the US, but if you're a non-US supplier, then you also have to get a US tax ID. I can't remember what it's called, an EAN or something. I can't quite remember the correct. And then it's as I say, it's a relatively simple process to create an app package from Access. But you do need to edit the app package before you upload it to the App Store. The store itself has some really great features. And if you just looked at apps on the store and you thought, oh wow, I can put my Access web apps on there, I can use these features, I can have a trial period, I can set it up for monthly subscriptions with user-based pricing and so on, I would put a bit of a warning out there. And that's that none of these processes are actually enforced for Access web apps, although I have tried them and I'm still trying them. And the reason for that is that the web app doesn't know anything about SharePoint licensing or SharePoint app licensing. So what that means is if you do publish your app with monthly subscription pricing, then a client could, in theory, buy a single user license for 1 month, and they would be able to use the app forever. So you do need to be a bit careful about that. And in my main HR app, I've built licensing into the app itself, which is quite easy to do. So potentially this can limit sales and alternatively increase the work that you need to do. Having said that, there's no problem with selling apps for a one-off price, and that again is an approach I've taken which works pretty well. Okay, what other options are there? Well, what I've basically done is to provide my main app, my HR app, free on the App Store. It then provides the customer with 14-day trial period, after which they have to buy licensing via a link, in-app link from our website, that, as I say, that works quite well, and it's based on, in this case, the number of records that can be processed in it. It's a human resources app. They're generally charged in the market by the number of employees they're used for. One of the things that I have been slightly disappointed by is the volume of sales through the App Store, and I'm working to improve that at the moment. But one of the things that I have been interested to find is Office 365 partners. Quite a lot of Office 365 implementation partners are interested in these apps. I have one who I was speaking to earlier today. I think they've installed 4 systems so far, and I think they've got another one on the go. And the other final option is, of course, you could sell the licenses for your apps directly from your own website, but then you'd have to take care of any international tax implications, manage the process of distributing updated files to clients, and so on. And it wouldn't be as seamless a purchase as if they were made available from the App Store. Okay, so if you like, there are some disadvantages to using the App Store at the moment. There are things that I am constantly reminding Microsoft about, and I'm going to be seeing somebody there next week to talk to them about it some more. So hopefully something will come along eventually to sort that out. Okay, so we talked about the store. What about actually managing the apps and the life cycle in terms of development and test and so forth? So the way I work is I use a main development environment on my SharePoint site where I have development versions of all of my apps. I make sure I back them up at least every version to both a locked copy for distribution and an unlocked snapshot just in case, although I've never had an app actually break and have to be replaced so far. I should touch wood when I say that. Then, as I say, I save an app for deployment in a locked state. I upgrade a test version in a separate site to make sure that the upgrade itself works, and that's a very important part of the process because sometimes upgrades don't work. To date, it's always been due to bugs in the platform. Microsoft have been good though and sorted them as an app package on the App Store. All the upgrades are automatic, and you can use on-deploy macros, as I mentioned earlier, if you need to, maybe to move some data. Typical example might be if you have for example, used to have a single field for an emergency contact in a table, and I wanted to change that to a related table, so I needed to move the data from one to the other when the system was installed, and that's very simple to do, and I can show that in a bit. Clients then see that an update's available in site contents, and it's quite easy to then apply, although it can take 10 minutes or so. So, problems with the store. It has been known for the metrics that Microsoft provide suppliers not to work correctly all the time. And they don't provide you with any client details at all, and this is by policy. Their privacy policy means that they will not pass client details on to people selling apps in the App Store, which makes having a business relationship with your customers quite difficult. I use the process of getting customers to register the apps, but a large percentage of them don't do that, and I can't really enforce it. As I said, trial subscription and per user pricing don't work for us at the moment as Access people. And I have been slightly concerned that business users may not yet really be ready to buy applications through an app store, or at least larger business users anyway. I found that I've got a lot of very small clients and fewer than I would hope of larger customers, although again that is slowly changing. And I think the reason that's changing is I'm finding more and more ways to engage directly with clients in the process of their evaluation by building in inquiry facilities and building in training videos and so forth into the apps to encourage them to contact us and to talk things through rather than just having a quick look and then deciding whether to go ahead or not.
So Julian, we have one question. That's what do you mean by metrics?
Oh, okay. Metrics. The App Store, I'll show you if you like in a minute. The App Store provides you with statistics about how many things you've sold, how many browser hits have happened, that kind of thing. Occasionally they stop working. It's been going on like that for a year or so, and just sometimes it doesn't work. And sometimes it doesn't work for several weeks. At the moment it's working fine, so maybe it's fixed permanently, but I'm not quite sure. As I've mentioned already, one alternative, which is to sell your apps directly, deliver them digitally via a shopping cart maybe, but you are then exposed to A, generating enough traffic, and B, building some sort of process for clients to be able to upgrade their apps. Updating would be more manual. How would you generate the traffic and so on? So unless you've got a very targeted vertical market that you know very well, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that at all. But you could try a hybrid approach. So in summary, I've always felt that AWA, and the reason I chose to use them in the first place, because I wasn't an Access user at the time, although I had been for many years, but I wasn't an Access user at the time. I was looking for a tool to build web apps quickly, so a RAD tool, I wanted cloud delivery, I wanted a store, I wanted good lifecycle management, and I still think it's pretty unique in that respect. However, we know that there are gaps. Reporting, particularly with locked apps, is not very pretty. Integration and flexibility are a bit of a big deal as well. So there have been some issues. The forums have been full of people questioning the performance on occasion, although I think it's getting better, is my impression. And the integration of store features if you're looking to commercialize your work. And I think App Store awareness, I'm not 100% certain how well publicized it is. Okay, so that was that. So this is my human resources application. We're going to look at some of the ways that I manage this. First of all, I said I build licensing into the app itself, so a client can come in here if they have run out of licenses. So this one is licensed for 51 employees and it has 41 people in it. If they have 51 people, they won't be able to add another employee. It's as simple as that. They click on here, I think, and then UK customers can order directly. Non-UK customers fill in an application form, but a customer just clicks on here, fills in a shopping cart, buys some licenses, and we send them some codes, which they then put into these boxes down here. And that applies the licenses to their system. So that's what happens. I'll take you through the process, I think, of actually, first of all, show you the store itself. So let's open a new page and go to the seller dashboard. So if you have an Office Store account, then you can go in here to the seller dashboard, where you get to see information about your apps. Okay. I mentioned metrics. You can go in here and it will show you. Shouldn't have done this first because this takes a bit of time. Stats for your various products. So you can see with my HR app, it says there have been 450,000 visits to its web page and 1,844 downloads. That figure is correct. This one isn't, I don't think, because the number per day suddenly changed from a very large number to a very small number about a year or so ago, and I think they had some mistakes. You can see in here how many downloads and purchases you've had, how many reviews your app has, and so on. And you can see that I really have one app that's being successful, the HR app, and the others not so much. If we go back to the Manage option, if I wanted to upload a new version of one of these apps, I can go in and edit the listing and go through the process of changing the version and so on. What I'll do now is I'll take you through the process that I use to actually prepare a new release of the software. Okay, so I'm going to go into Access. I'll actually I'm actually going to use a demonstration database that I have, just so that I can show you how it all works. So the first thing that you need to do, having completed your app, is to come into the File option and click on Save As. You then have three options to save the database as a snapshot, which, as the text on the screen shows, is a complete backup of the app, including all data. So I would recommend that you do that periodically, at least once with each version, and I generally do so just before I'm going to do any high-risk updates for obvious reasons. Save for deployment, which is the one used to create a locked app for the app Office Marketplace. or it can be published on your internal corporate catalog. So that produces a locked app, as I said. You are not able to connect Access front ends to it or anything else because you cannot open the database for external access. The other option is to save as a new app. So if you're going to base a new project on an existing app, then that would be the option to take, and it gives the app a new app ID. We'll see what that means in a minute, which means that you could have both apps in the same site at the same time. Okay. So let's go through the process of saving for deployment. Okay. The first thing you have is the app title, which in this case is Compact App for Blog. It's not very catchy, so I'll give it a call it just call it Contact. Oops, can't type. And a version. In order to make upgrades work, a version that you're applying has to have a higher version number than the version it's being applied to, and that's important to note. And it will also, Microsoft will also check that the version that you specify here is the same as any version that you've shown on screen to the customer, for example. And you can make these apps locked or unlocked when they're produced, but really the locked version is the only sensible approach to distributing apps because they're then updatable and clients can't get at the code and break it basically. So click OK. It will then ask you where you want to put it. I will put it on my desktop in a folder called Demo. Okay, so it'll go away and do that. It'll take a minute or two to do. While that's happening, I mentioned earlier that one of the things that you need to do when you're producing an app is to make some changes to the app package, which is the file that this actually produces. Now, I'm going to actually show that on a file I prepared earlier, or rather I'm going to show one of my actual live apps and its package. Okay, a couple of things here. In here I've got the latest release of my HR application. It's called Casper Pro. An app package is actually a zip file. So once you've produced your app package, all you need to do, has that actually finished? Yes, it has. I can show it for real then, is to rename it to desktop. Contacts.zip. Okay, and then expand it. Having expanded it, if you're going to produce an app for the store, one thing that you will need to do is to create a 96 by 96 pixel icon for it and replace the default Access icon. It has to be called accessapp.png, but otherwise it's up to you what icon you design. And you have to have the same icon within your app package as you upload to the store for the store to use on its display screens. So that's something that's very important, because Microsoft will check, and they have caught me on it a couple of times when I've forgotten in the early days. The one other thing that you sometimes need to change is the app manifest XML file. And the only reason for this, really, is this little chap here. You may be aware that there are different locale settings, location settings for SharePoint, and because mine is a UK installation of Access, it has produced a UK locale. So that means UK date formats. Pretty much with Access Web Apps, actually, that's all it affects. But for me, the first thing I do is to add this and put in the US locale. And that means on installation that the customer has the choice between GB date formats, basically, and US date formats. That pretty much covers everybody. The only slight downside and snag to the whole process is Microsoft don't make it very obvious that there is a choice, and it defaults to US, which is unfortunate for people in the UK, because they end up with a system installed with US dates, which is slightly annoying. There are a couple of other things that are worth looking at in here. Apps have a type. If they're produced in this way, then they'll be called Access Locked. They have a version number, which is the version that you keyed in, and they have a product ID. And each app package that you provide the store must have the same product ID, or the same product ID if it's the same app. So in other words, if you were to try to supply an app package with the wrong product ID, then it will again be rejected, and so on. It won't work. So we'll save that. And that's really all you need to do. Then you re-zip it up and call it whatever you want. And I then put it back in the original folder. And there I've got the zip file, the expanded zip file, and the new version of the app all there. And this one, assuming I put a new icon in it, would be ready to upload to the App Store. Okay, any questions so far? No? Okay. Moving on. A couple of times, no, I haven't done that in there. A couple of times I've mentioned the fact that you can create on-deploy macros, which are used generally to move data or to set initialize data when an app is installed. So this is my Human Resources app. It's quite big, as you can see. There are quite a lot of tables. There are quite a lot of views or forms. And indeed, there are a lot of macros. Some of those are data macros, and some of them are UI ones, which control screen layouts and so on. There is a special case macro, though, called Access on Deploy. And it's actually created from here. Click on Deploy Macro, and it will create this macro for you. And that is simply, in my case, a place where I call, it's a data macro, it's a place where I call a sequence of data macros that make various data changes that have become necessary over time, or that fix a bug or whatever. The reason I leave them all in is that updates are not forced on customers through the App Store, so you don't really know which version a customer is coming from. So the sequence of macros really needs to stay there in case somebody's upgrading a very old version. But what we'll do is we'll look at one of these macros. I mentioned something about contacts, so I call all my macros that are on deploy ODDM for on deploy data macro, and then the name move contacts. So we'll have a look at that. Okay. So this macro is fairly straightforward. First of all, it looks up a record in a table called employee contacts, and if it finds a record, it stops. So that's a way of really determining whether this macro has either run previously or the employee or the system has previously had this new table called employee contacts in it, and the customers used it. If it doesn't find a record in employee contacts, then for each record in a table called person, I think you can appreciate what that's likely to be, it moves the employee contact fields from there and creates a new record in the employee contacts table. And that's it. So it's very, very simple to create a macro to move data when schema changes require it. Okay. Right, I think that's covered that. Any questions? Because I think I've come to the end of what I wanted to say about deploying new versions. So, Andy?
Yeah, I don't see any more messages in the chat window.
Okay.
So far so good.
See the thing.
The chat?
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. How do I get to see the chat? Oh, like that. I see. Yep. Okay.
Okay.
Was that understandable? Did everybody follow that?
Yeah, that was good. Any questions? George, I'm hearing some background noise there, so I'm going to mute you for now.
Hi, George.
You know, you were talking a little bit about your price for it, and that you can't you can't really force people to register or anything like that. Have you thought about doing? I mean, I'm assuming if they register, they get free updates.
They get free updates anyway.
Oh, they do. Okay.
Yeah.
So you may want to give them your your ebook then.
What I do when if they're registered users and if they're with the HR app, because they have to buy the licenses directly, they basically are registered anyway. It's the other apps where it's a bit more tricky. They have to register obviously on a web page, and I can't determine in the app whether they've done that or not.
Yeah. Is there any possibility where, if they register with you or something like that, where you can like open up 2 or 3 features that other people would normally have? I know that's kind of an odd upgrade, but
yeah, I could do, and I'm constantly thinking about ways in which to improve the stickiness, if you like, of the apps. I put a lot of effort recently into some training videos in the HR app, and I need to do some more. They're not my most favorite thing to do, I have to say, but yeah, I'm thinking about doing that. There are, I think, 4 in there at the moment that cover the biggest questions that I generally get from a support point of view.
Right.
Yeah, I would recommend, if you can, handling the licensing yourself. Apart from anything, of course, Microsoft don't get their 20% then. But at some point, I'd have thought that Microsoft might not like that very much, but they don't seem to mind. But yeah, I think I think that the thing that's worked best for me has definitely to be able to have the trial period on the HR app and to do the licensing myself. You really can't use the store's trial period because they'll forget it. They'll forget that it's on trial. It'll go past the date, and then they'll suddenly realise that it's still working. So you'll have given your app away. So really, don't click that provide a trial period option in the
right. Well,
page.
I mean, is there something where you could have it pop up on the screen after a number of days, like if they, I don't know what that would be, but so that if that did happen, they'll pop up. By the way, this kind of like Windows XP does if you don't register it. It keeps popping up the black screen that this is an unregistered version.
What I do have in it, the HR app takes care of itself because I do the licensing. I send them the codes. They and they have to buy new ones if they go over it and stuff. So that all happens very nicely. For the other two apps, the system administrator gets an email approximately every 45 days to remind them how many users are on the system and to make sure that they're fully licensed. I'm just kind of hoping that at some point that Microsoft will do something about it and enable us to enforce the licensing on customers. It can't be that difficult for them to do. There is an API for the App Store, which if you're coding your apps in Visual Studio, you can use. I would presume that Microsoft know how to use that. So yeah, hopefully they'll do it one day, but who knows? They haven't so far. I think if there were more of us publishing apps on the App Store and asking the question, then it may get a little bit more, leverage. So
right.
Yeah, that's been my biggest disappointment probably. That and the fact that you can't get at the data externally. Those are the two big issues that I have with it, really.
Right.
Having said that, I've thought often about whether what I decided to do, which was to do some Access web apps, was a good idea or not. And I still think it was, because I still think there are some unique features about AWA that nothing else got. One of the big things is the existence of the App Store, the ease with which you can get things on the App Store, and the fact that the platform is very affordable, i.e. they're buying Office anyway. Oh, we've got this platform we can run databases on. Fantastic. Most other RAD platforms out there, of which there are quite a few, some of them are very good, but the platform's very expensive and would make the sale of a single app based on them very difficult to justify, not to say impossible to justify. And it would become a significant IT decision process rather than, we need an HR app, it's £10 an employee, let's just do it and see if it's any good, which
right.
is, which is a sort of a more App Store way of doing things, yeah? So it's sort of very nearly there, but not quite. But it's for me, wanting to have a relatively low input business, if you like, or for somebody like you guys who are doing consulting, you have an app that you think might be popular, but you don't want to spend all your time marketing and selling and supporting it and delivering updates to clients and all the kind of stuff that you have to do with, for example, Access applications. Then this makes life very easy for you.
Sure.
Stick it on the App Store and forget, really. It's fire and forget until a client says, error message on your, employee screen or something. and you have to fix it. But again, delivering the fixes is very, very simple. And one of the things I do with all registered users is I invite them to join an online forum that I have. I'll show you that. Can I do that actually? Somewhere. I use this thing called Podio. I'm not logged in on this.
Yeah. What is Podio?
It's it's a thing which you can kind of produce apps with online, but the great thing about it is you can invite people to join your apps externally, and you can embed forms on your website very easily. It's nowhere nearly as powerful as Access Web Apps, but I have this for my customers, and customers, if they register, get invited to join, and they can interact with me, they can interact with each other, they can put in feature requests, and I think clients quite like this. So, all these things have been delivered or implemented and so on, and they can, if they request an upgrade, a new feature, then they will get emails advising them of the progress of it. They can vote on other people's suggestions and that kind of thing. So, and bug reports go in here as well, and I make announcements about new.
So it's a little like user
updates.
voice.
It's a bit like it. Yeah, it's a bit more sophisticated than that, but yeah. And customers are invited to join as sort of as a lower user level, and the whole thing is basically it's a bit like Facebook, except it revolves around data. So you have a stream here, like a social media site, showing you things that have happened to the data. So, for example, these people were trying to import some data, and they noticed that they had to fiddle about with a checkbox control, put false in, I think, if I remember rightly, and they chose to do it on here, which is public, which I find quite useful because it means that other people who've got similar problems will see the answer.
Gotcha.
And it's all searchable. So, yeah, I mean, I did look at doing apps with Podio, but it's not really for that kind of thing. So, but it's very useful for this sort of stuff. So, registered customers get an invite to that. And then this is the HR app itself. So, have a quick look at that. It's gone to sleep. Have you noticed that AWAs go to sleep? They take a bit longer to respond. So this is the main employee screen, and you've got searching features up here, and you've got links to various other aspects of the data here. You can look at their absences and all the usual things. I tend to use related items controls much more than I do subviews for related data, and use pop-ups for editing and so on. The system sends emails for all sorts of things, for workflows and so on. How many of you here have used viewer.aspx based screens? Have you, Andy?
No, I don't think I have.
Okay, but you've heard of it, have you?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, all right. We've talked at various things we've been at about the very railed experience of the design that you can, the design you can produce, with the menu down the left and the tabs along the top and what have you. One of Microsoft's demo apps shows using a screen without all that Chrome to print some forms. I think it's printing invoices or something. And it occurred to me that it could be used for any view. So this is a view from which could have been shown within the main app here, but it's for employees, and I don't want them to have access to everything in the application. And they can come in here. If they're managers, they can drill down, see employees that work for them. They can click a button and go to an employee telephone directory type thing. They can go further down the screen. They can request some leave. But it's all standalone in its own web page, and I use that extensively in the apps that I do now. There's a screen here for timesheets. There's a completely standalone, i.e., again without even the rest of the self-service screen that I was just showing. Form for requesting leave. For some reason it's taking a second to load. It's normally quicker. So you've got your leave requests here. You can add a new one, and it's all much easier to use than the full-blown thing. Yeah. And then the app sends people emails. Hang on, was I right? Something from the right app. Time recording app has been sending lots of emails. That one looks like, and you just click here, and it'll take you to the link to the screen that you need to respond to that particular request. Okay, so I think without this feature, I would possibly not have been able to make a very successful go of the HR system. I started in a very clunky way where unauthorized users would be diverted to this screen, and if they tried to open any of these menu options down the left-hand side, they get an error message and they get thrown back here again, and they'd have to click this link here to go to their self-service screen, which would be a pop-up, and that was really very user-friendly. But since I discovered this feature, it makes all the difference. Okay. I've done things like produce calendars, which if only Microsoft provided us with a proper control, it would be great, but it works okay. I broke the maximum size that you used to be able to have for a macro producing these screen layouts, because it does things like puts the numbers in all the boxes and changes the colors of them depending on working patterns and all that kind of thing. So there's a lot going on there, but it was all possible. Okay. Right. Any other questions anyone has? Oh.
So this is Eric.
Yep. Hi, Eric.
Showing up as Westmont Electronics, that's my company, but I don't really publish, just use internal. I'm wondering if Access Web Apps, if Microsoft did a better job with the product, that it might be more successful in the App Store. And I think it's great. I love it. Use it
Can't hear you
all the time, but it doesn't seem to be progressing. Their added features are very limited so far.
Can't hear you.
Yeah, Eric, you're breaking up on us a little bit, but I think the crux of what he's saying is that, you know, it seems like they're not really expanding a lot on Access Web Apps. And do you think that there would be a lot more people that would be utilizing it if they were, you know, putting enhancements on a faster track?
Correct.
Erica's have to be a little bit circumspect, but I think just to say there is an Access team still. Yeah, I do agree with you. There hasn't been much for the last, year or so. I think there are a lot of things that need to be done to access web apps. Personally, I'm slightly disappointed that we haven't seen more yet. For me, there are a number of features that I would like to see. Proper integration with some BI tools. Basically, it would probably be Power BI now. The ability to do stuff on mobile, sorting out the store things, and providing external access to data. That would be a start. I think they're quite complicated things. And I think with the existence of things like Power BI and stuff like that, I can see some opportunities for Microsoft to do a lot of good stuff, but I think they might take a little while. But we just have to assume they've put a lot of effort into this, and the more of us that use it, the more likely they are to upgrade it. I know that's a slightly catch-22 situation. But I think it's the truth of the matter.
Yeah, it just seems to be missing a lot of the very basic items.
What are your thoughts about what you'd like to see?
Well, I think it'd be nice if it integrated in with the other products better. Like our contacts. It'd be nice to manage them in an Access web app and then also have them show up in Outlook.
Yeah, I can see that. Yep.
I know we can do it through SharePoint, but you've got to go out of the Access user interface and go to SharePoint to add. I just don't really want to do that. And it was really slow when I tried it. Anytime I touch SharePoint, it's been really slow. I have large databases. And SharePoint just doesn't work well. I'd like to have better views for my large databases. They have these BI views, which is great and fine, but I'd rather see the data first in a table, some sort of pivot table or something like that. Be able to drill down.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the moment this is a bit of Access web apps are a bit of an isolation from pretty much everything. I've heard that the SharePoint integration is very slow. I can't actually use it for apps that are going out through the App Store because clearly I wouldn't know whether a client had a SharePoint table called XYZ or not, and so it's not possible for me to do that because I can't create the SharePoint list from within the app.
Right.
To do that would be jolly handy for managing documents and so on, but I can't do it. So I haven't really worried about it. But yeah, I take your point, and I think what I personally feel is they have a huge opportunity because they've got some good fundamentals here, and there's a huge market for something like this finished, as it were, and they need to get on and do it, but it's not going to be that easy, I don't think, to do everything everyone wants. I mean, I suppose as Access people, what we'd all like it to become is truly Access the web. I used to do all the things that Access was always very good at, like accessing multiple sources of data and presenting them in consolidated forms and all that kind of thing that Access is great at. But they're not there with that yet, are they?
Not quite. I do link to it through ODBC, and that works out fairly well for appending and reading, but the updates are pretty slow. If I'm doing a large data set, it's so slow it'll time out sometimes.
Mm. I mean, I've successfully linked. I don't know if any of you have ever seen it, but I've successfully linked a Power App to it. Power Apps is on limited release from Microsoft at the moment. You can request to be included, and that generates mobile apps, which you can run on iOS and Android and so on, and that works okay. But again, I can't use that in my real work because it won't be able to connect to a locked app. So it defeats the object for me. But again, for internal use, that's quite handy.
Yeah,
So
we're using it. Go ahead. I was just saying we're pretty much using it for our CRM.
Yep.
You know, the dynamic CRM is cost prohibitive and also looks like a pretty substantial IT department to get that thing up and running and keep it going.
Yeah, I ran screaming when I tried to use it a few years ago. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've produced a CRM app as well, which a few people are buying, but I think there are so many CRM options out there that it's kind of difficult to get traction on it. And there are lots of App Store options for CRM. They're generally add-ons for CRM platforms, but you know, this is my effort, as it were. So what's anyone else using web apps for?
Julian?
Is that you, George? Hi.
Yes, hi. I demoed one at the summit last fall. I don't know if you recall.
Yep. Yeah, I do.
And after a series of adventures, which I won't go into detail here, we are back in production.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what we're doing is pulling Facebook posts from the organization's Facebook page, putting them into an Access web app, and allowing the office staff to go through those posts and either dispose of them by deactivating them or create what they call a story. And the story involves a client with a need and a donor with resources and putting them together. It works really well in the current state. I think there's a little bit more refinement that we can do, but I'm pretty pleased with the results. What we're doing is basically a task scheduler task runs every night to go to Facebook and get whatever new posts they have and append them into the table using an ODBC connection.
Right.
And I see this basically as being an app where people sitting in the office can manage it, but if somebody takes their Surface Pro and goes and visits somebody under a bridge, a homeless person under a bridge, they've got access to the data through the web browser on that tablet. So I can keep talking, so I'll just mute myself and talk to the all.
So Julian, one of the guys here said he's curious to hear more about the last feature you spoke about, which I'm assuming is Power Apps. I hate to put you on the spot, but would you be able to kind of show people a little bit about what Power Apps is and how it works?
Actually, before Power Apps, I was one that made it when you talked about using instead of using more pop-ups instead of subforms in your design here. You spoke about some feature that you said you're using that much more, and I wasn't clear what that was.
Yeah, Viewer ASPX.
Well, there are two things. One is displaying things in Viewer ASPX, which is this. So this is just loading a instead of that saying default.aspx there, which it does here, if you run an app normally, you have viewer.aspx and then question mark page equals and the page name or the view name from the app. But what I was referring to was the fact that I tend to use, let's go in here where there'll be some data. I tend to use related items controls far more than I use subviews or subforms as we used to in the Access world. So these are controls which have tabs, and each tab links to a related table and lets you add and edit and does things like, for example, that's connected it to the right employee in terms of relationships. And then you go in and enter the task and so on. So I use those quite a bit. And the good thing with them is when you complete a record and close it and save it, then it will get added to the related items list automatically. Because there are some issues with refreshing parent forms and so on in web apps, and it gets around that one. The only problem is that they're not directly editable, so I can't edit that field, although it seems to have edited it. Oh no, it hasn't edited it, it just looks as though it's edited. I've never tried that before. That's bad. Okay. The other thing, as I say, is displaying screens in the viewer control instead, or the viewer framework rather than in the main web app display format. And I'll show you how that's actually, or one of the ways that you can do that. If I come in here, no, I think I'll go in here. This will do it. Edit this screen. I'm trying to remember exactly where I've done this. Yeah, okay. What you do is you can create a hyperlink which will open a viewer session, or will open any view in viewer.aspx just by doing this, by setting a hyperlink controls value to some text, which is what you want displayed, then hash viewer.aspx and then question mark and the parameter page equals ESS container in this case, and that will create a hyperlink control on the form. Let's have a look at it. Oops. With the text My Self-Service, which if you click it, opens in a new window the self-service screen. It'll take a couple of seconds.
That's a pretty neat little trick. I've never seen that before.
Okay, there is actually, as I said, one of the demo Access applications has it in it. I can't remember which one it is, but it's on the App Store. And I think I've got a blog post about it as well. If you couldn't sort of remember that, I suppose it'll be in the video, Andy, won't it?
Yeah. Yep.
Good point. It'll be in the video. The other, then of course you can open those screens not from within the application, just by putting the full URL into the browser, obviously. But it generates the URL for you. It means in a distributed app, where you don't know what the URL of the client's installation is, you can build in controls like that, which will take them to the standalone, what I call standalone screens. Okay. You did mention Power Apps very briefly. I've got a couple of Power Apps here. They're both connected to the very simple contacts database I created an export from, or saved an app file from. They take a while to open for some reason. Oh, I've opened it rather than editing it. You can't stop it.
So if I want to follow up more on that, open up the separate page in the viewer framework, what kind of keywords should I be looking at to search on? Viewer framework, hyperlink.
What are you looking for, Charles?
Yeah, to have the it, like you said, popping up in a separate window.
Okay.
Based on a hyperlink.
Okay.
For me to search more about it, where would I look? What would I call it? Hyperlink. Because are you typing in that value? I mean, are the value there for the hyperlink? Is that something that you generated, or you?
Generated that, yes. But Microsoft have obviously built in this feature though, because I don't think it would work for any other link in that way. Normally, you would have to put the hyperlink value in totally, unless the hash actually implies the. I guess that implies the URL of the app that you're running. I guess.
Anyway, I will definitely explore that. That's I can see that being very useful.
It is very useful.
Okay.
Back to this Power App thing quickly. So this is a. Bear in mind that this is a Microsoft beta. It's not under NDA or anything anymore, so it's quite fine to show it to anybody. But this was an app that that was built automatically. I just pointed it at a data source. So access.contacts, which is the name of the table in the database, and I've told it some fields that I want it to display. It's displaying those in a repeating view. It has a button to go and edit it. It's got a facility here to sort up or down and to search. And if you run that, it would look like this on your mobile phone. Okay, and that was a couple of minutes to do that. I decided to have a go at doing it the hard way. Which one was that, actually? Hang on. This one is Log Series app. Oh, stupid twit. Yeah, I decided it was worth having a go at doing it from scratch as well. Because very often when you use things that automatically generate apps, I find that you never really fully understand how they work. So I have a splash page on my app. It's doing basically the same thing. It's showing pretty much the same data. It doesn't, but it's now got an ability to edit your contact and then go and look at activities about that contact as well, which it then displays. So it's pretty basic stuff, but you know, it can do that, and that is fairly easy to produce, and it'll run on your iPhone or whatever. But it runs inside a Power Apps client on your phone. That's how they can make it cross-platform. Okay? Is that sort of interest to anybody?
Yeah, that's very informative. And that's pulling information right off of your Access web app?
So the first thing you have to do is obviously to go into your web app, open it up for external read, write, access, come in here and create a connection to that database, which for some reason all the connections get called SQL Azure. So I've got two connections. They're both called SQL Azure, and I have no idea which one's which. At the moment, you can't name them. But you connect with a connection string. The only slight trickiness is to create the connection string correctly. But there's help on the web to do that if you don't know how to do that. And then you can get right in and see the tables and stuff in the database. At the moment, the connections are only connecting to tables, not to views or queries. So that is slightly limited, and some of the controls don't seem to work. I wanted to put a date control on here, and the date picker control didn't seem to be data aware. So whilst you could put dates in it with the date picker, you couldn't connect them to the database and update it. So it's very much a beta.
So, what about like maps? Can you integrate maps if you have an address shown?
I think so. There are all sorts of very clever things you can do with it, actually. If you go on here, content, you've got various... sorry, that's the wrong button. Where am I? Oh, insert. You've got lots of different controls that you can use. You've got different types of galleries for displaying images and text and so on. It doesn't understand the way Access web apps hold images, unfortunately. We think they're in the same table, or as far as the designer is concerned, they're in the same table as the all the other data, but they're not. They're, as we know, probably some of us know, they're shifted out to a different table for some reason. Can't remember why. But you've got charts, column, line, and pie charts that you can put in here. And I think you can link to maps. I think I've seen a demo link to maps, but I'm not quite sure how.
Julian?
Yep.
The reason images were moved out was for performance.
Okay.
And why and how that is the case, but that's what Kevin Bell told us.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that makes sense, doesn't it? But I mean, Power Apps are quite cool, but I've heard a few things like they only bring in the first 250 records of a table or something. And I'm also not entirely convinced that they're not doing the data filtering in the handheld device. And so if you had a very large table, if I look at this table here, if I remember rightly, the data is being filtered in the display control here. As you can see, it's filtering access activities by a filter with where contact equals contact ID, which is a parameter that was passed to the screen. If that's happening in the device and you've got a million rows in that table, it could take a while for that to happen. And an awful lot of data being sent to your handheld, your mobile phone or whatever, that you might not want sent. But
can you do anything remotely, like with Alpha? You can take your app with you, even if you're disconnected. You can add and edit files, and then when you're back to a place that has a connection, it'll sync back up. Can you do anything like that?
Bit like Access, there's a Power Apps user voice, and that's if I remember rightly, that's one that's been requested and is under consideration, if I remember rightly. But we know from the Access User Voice that they don't really tell us much, do they?
Right.
So, yeah, but yeah, I mean, it makes it's obviously a requirement for a mobile app, isn't it? So, hopefully one day. But again, this is fairly early days. I think it's some way behind Access web apps in terms of the state of the technology.
Sure.
And they make sense together, though. If you can't do a decent user interface for mobile, which you can't with AWA at the moment, then you can use this up to a point already to make something useful, even if it isn't pretty yet.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, real good. Well, I see we're bumping up to 8:30, so I really appreciate your time in helping us with this. Yeah, it's been really good.
Okay. Right. Any more questions before we finish then from anyone?
I just have one, Julian. Really quick.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yep.
Really quick, I just noticed looking at your screens that most of them take up the left half or less. Is there a reason why you're not using the full screen, or is that...
It's because I've got a very big monitor, George.
Well, so do I. But I'm just curious if is it because of deployment onto different monitors, or is that...
Yeah, I came to a decision that about this width, which is probably about, looking at my screen, it's about 1,000 characters, about 1,000 pixels was probably about enough for some people. So, there are still people with VGA screens around, I should think, aren't there?
Yeah, that would not surprise me.
Yeah, some things never change.
Exactly. So yeah, it'd be nice to be able to use more screen real estate, but really, I think you've got to go with the flow. I use this screen. That's a 27-inch screen. I generally use it with multiple windows like that and have it about this size, which makes it look sensible.
All right, real good.
The other thing I've done is these little these dividers. They're obviously just a label with a background color, but stupidly you can't set them in the design environment. You have to do it in a Mac.
Yeah, the set property back value.
Yeah.
Back color, I mean. Yeah.
Yep. Which is annoying, but it does mean that I can let users pick a color, and they can pick a color that they want them all to be to match their whatever their corporate setup
color
is.
scheme.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, great. Well, yeah, thanks again. Again, we're having the next meeting will be the third Tuesday of the month again, and if I can pull up my calendar, I could actually tell people when that is. Looks like May 17th. So, yeah, please join us again. If you have any questions or you want to sign up for anything, please jump on AccessWebApps.org and sign up there. And again, Julian, I really appreciate your giving this demo today. It's been awesome.
Well, if unless my holiday is going badly, I probably won't see you. I think I'm in Las Vegas that night.
Oh man. Well, if you have to pick one of the two.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Anyway, nice to meet you all, guys.